It all started with a smile across the office. One of those harmless glances that lingers a second too long. I told myself it was nothing, just a moment, just a look. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. My name is Rachel, and I've always considered myself loyal. I've been married to Mark for 8 years. We built a quiet life together, routine, predictable, safe. But safe doesn't always mean happy. Somewhere between managing work deadlines and grocery lists, we stopped seeing each other. I mean really seeing each other. And then came Alex. The new guy in the marketing department. Confident, easygoing, always cracking jokes that made everyone around him laugh. At first, I didn't pay much attention. But he noticed me, noticed the little things. Like how I always stayed late to finish up, how I never joined in on lunch breaks, how my smile didn't quite reach my eyes. He started leaving sticky notes with motivational quotes on my desk. Silly ones, but they made me laugh. I laughed more in those first few weeks with Alex than I had at home in months. Still, I told myself it was just friendly. I was married. I wasn't that kind of woman. But work started to feel like an escape. I began looking forward to Mondays. I started dressing a little nicer, putting on lipstick again. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. The lines blurred slowly, quiet chats turned into long talks after hours. Innocent compliments grew more personal. One night, when the office was nearly empty, he offered to walk me to my car. It was raining, and we shared an umbrella. And in that soft silence under the gray sky, he reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. That moment changed everything. I wish I could say I stopped it there. I wish I had gone home, told Mark the truth, and tried to fix what was broken. But I didn't. I fell into something I couldn't control, something that felt so wrong but also so intoxicatingly right. Each lie I told my husband chipped away at our foundation. I started keeping secrets, locking my phone, making excuses. And the guilt, it grew louder every day. I thought I could manage both lives. I truly believed I could balance the affair without destroying everything. But the truth has a way of rising, even when you bury it deep. One unexpected message, one careless moment, and it all unraveled. My husband found out. And just like that, the life I had spent years building crumbled in a single night. I lost more than I expected. But what came after was something I never saw coming. Because Mark didn't react the way I thought he would. And Alex, well, he wasn't the man I thought he was either. What happened next changed my life in ways I'm still trying to understand. After Mark found out, everything changed. He didn't yell. He didn't scream or throw things like I imagined he would. Instead, he went completely quiet. That silence hurt more than any fight could have. He looked at me like I was a stranger, someone he didn't recognize anymore. I wanted to explain, to make him understand that it wasn't about love or hate, it was about feeling invisible for so long. But how do you explain something like that without sounding selfish? I had betrayed him, and there was no soft way to say it. We lived in the same house, but it felt colder than ever. He slept in the guest room, barely spoke a word, and left early every morning without saying goodbye. I still remember the look in his eyes, numb, distant, like the person I once knew had vanished overnight. Meanwhile, I kept going to work, pretending everything was normal. But it wasn't. The guilt followed me like a shadow. And Alex, he wasn't who I thought he was. After everything came out, he started pulling away. The playful texts stopped. The warm glances turned cautious. He said he didn't want drama and that I needed to sort things out at home first. It stung more than I expected. I had risked my marriage for someone who couldn't even stand beside me when it mattered. That's when I realized how little I actually knew him. He had always been good at saying the right things, charming, thoughtful, attentive, but maybe that's all it ever was. Words. In the days that followed, rumors started to spread around the office. Whispers in the break room, sudden silence when I walked in. It felt like everyone knew. The worst part wasn't just the shame, it was the loneliness. I had pushed away the one person who truly knew me, for something that turned out to be shallow and fleeting. And now I was standing in the ruins of my choices. Mark hadn't filed for divorce yet. But he stopped wearing his wedding ring. We were two people under one roof, sharing space but not a life. I kept waiting for him to talk, to tell me how he felt, to yell or cry, something. But he was just gone, even when he was right there in front of me. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. A dinner for two. Somewhere expensive. Dated just 3 days after he found out. My heart sank. I had no idea who he'd gone with, or why. I stared at that receipt for what felt like hours. My hands were shaking, and my mind kept racing through possibilities. Was it a friend? A colleague? Or had Mark already moved on, with someone new? I wanted to ask him, but the fear of hearing the answer held me back. I had no right to question him, not after what I did. But that didn't stop the jealousy from creeping in, or the sinking feeling in my chest that I might have lost him for good. At work, things only got worse. HR called me in after someone anonymously reported unprofessional behavior. I sat there in that stiff office chair as they politely but firmly reminded me about the company's relationship policy. Alex wasn't there to back me up. In fact, he'd been avoiding me entirely, keeping his distance, focusing on work, barely even making eye contact. It was like I had become a liability to him. And maybe I was. But he didn't have to make me feel like I was nothing. Meanwhile, Mark started acting different. Colder, yes, but also more calculated. He began going out more, dressing better, keeping his phone close. Part of me wondered if this was payback. Maybe he wanted me to feel what he felt. Maybe that dinner wasn't a one-time thing. I couldn't help but notice the new cologne, or the way he'd smile at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. It was like he had flipped a switch, and suddenly he was the one living a secret life. The hardest part was the silence. We still shared a kitchen, passed each other in the hallway, sat across from each other at the dinner table, but we didn't speak unless it was about something practical. There were no arguments, no tears. Just space. And in that space, I started to realize how fragile everything really was. I tried reaching out to a close friend, someone I thought I could trust. But even she looked at me with disappointment when I told her the truth. It's funny how people disappear when your story stops making you look good. I was starting to feel like I had no one left. And just when I thought the worst of it was behind me, I got a message. From an unknown number. Just 3 words, "He knows everything." I stared at the message, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. He knows everything. I didn't know who sent it or what they meant exactly, but deep down, I felt it. This wasn't about Mark finding out about the affair that already happened. This was something else. Something darker. I tried to stay calm, but my hands were clammy, my thoughts racing. Who else knew? And what did they mean by everything? That night, I barely slept. I kept checking my phone, jumping at every sound, every ping. The silence in the house felt heavier than ever. Mark still hadn't said a word about the dinner receipt, and I still hadn't asked. I was afraid of what I'd find out, afraid that I had broken something that couldn't be fixed. But now, I had a new fear. Someone out there knew more than they should. The next day, I pulled into the office parking lot and noticed Alex's car wasn't there. My chest tightened. He'd been distant, but at least he was still showing up. I walked inside, trying to act normal, but the whispers were louder now. I caught a few stares, some curious, some judgmental. Something was happening behind the scenes, and I wasn't being told. Later that afternoon, I got called back into HR. This time, the atmosphere was different. Colder. They said someone had filed a formal complaint. Details were vague, but serious enough that they were launching an internal review. When I asked who filed it, they wouldn't say. But I already knew. I tried calling Alex, needing answers, but he didn't pick up. Not once. I even messaged him, no response. It was like he had vanished completely. I was being shut out, both at work and at home. The walls were closing in, and I didn't know who to trust. Back home, Mark was already there. Sitting on the couch, waiting. His phone was face down on the table, and a small duffel bag rested by the door. For a second, I thought he was leaving. But when I asked, he didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, really looked at me, and then said something I'll never forget. "Did you think I wouldn't find out about him too?" My stomach dropped. My lips parted, but no words came. Because I had no idea who he was talking about. I stood there frozen, my mouth dry, my mind racing through 100 thoughts all at once. Him? I thought he meant Alex, but Mark already knew about him. Unless there was someone else he thought I was involved with. I shook my head slowly, confused, scared. "Mark, what are you talking about?" I finally managed to whisper. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look angry. But his words hit harder than anything he could have yelled. "Your texts. The ones from months ago. You forgot to delete the backups." My heart dropped into my stomach. I had completely forgotten that our shared iCloud account was still linked to an old device in the closet. I barely remembered those conversations. They weren't even with Alex. They were with someone else, someone from work I had confided in long before Alex even joined the team. His name was Jordan. We had late-night conversations during a rough patch in my marriage. It was emotional, not physical. I told myself back then that it didn't count. But the things I had said, the way I had leaned on him, it wasn't innocent. And now, Mark had read every word. He stared at me, his expression unreadable. So was it just Alex? Or were there more? How long have I been married to someone I don't even know? I felt sick. My throat tightened, and I wanted to explain that it wasn't like that. That Jordan was just a moment, a brief escape from the emptiness I was feeling at home. But the words sounded weak, even in my head. Mark stood up, picked up the duffel bag, and moved it to the hallway. He wasn't leaving. He was kicking me out. But just as I reached for my coat and tried to hold it together, there was a knock at the door. We both paused, looking at each other, unsure of what to expect. He opened it slowly, and standing there was someone I never imagined seeing again. Jordan. My heart stopped. I hadn't spoken to him in almost a year. I had no idea how he found my address, unless he had been looking for me all along. He looked nervous, like he didn't know what to say. Mark stepped back, stunned. "Wow," he muttered. "I guess the timing couldn't be more perfect." Jordan looked at me and said, "I got your message. I know everything now. I had to come." My legs nearly gave out. "What message?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He pulled out his phone, showing me a screenshot. A message supposedly from me, sent just days ago. My name, my number. My words. "I need to see you. It's not over. Please come." But I hadn't sent it. Someone else did. And suddenly it hit me, this whole thing, the complaint at work, the anonymous messages, the HR reports, even the text Jordan got, someone was behind it. Someone who wanted to ruin everything. But who? And why now? Everything suddenly clicked into place. The anonymous message, the complaint at work, the fake text to Jordan, it was all part of something bigger. Someone had been watching, waiting, and pulling strings behind the scenes. I stared at the screen in Jordan's hand, stunned. "I never sent that," I said, my voice shaking. Mark looked from me to Jordan, clearly unsure who or what to believe anymore. But the question still hung in the air, Who would want to set me up like this? And then, almost like the answer had been waiting in the shadows, I remembered one person who had every reason to want me gone. Claire. She was a coworker, quiet, polite, always the helpful one. She had trained Alex when he first joined. And she had feelings for him. I remembered the way she used to watch us, how her friendliness shifted to cold politeness the moment she noticed our bond. I had brushed it off back then. But now, it all made sense. I told Mark and Jordan what I suspected. At first, they were skeptical, but when I pulled out my old work phone and checked the cloud backups, I found something, screenshots from months ago that I never saved. Messages that only someone who had access to my files could have seen. Claire had been on the IT help desk last winter when I brought in my phone for syncing issues. She must have mirrored my data. It was her. With proof in hand, I brought everything to HR the next morning. This time, I walked in prepared. Mark came with me, not because he had forgiven me, but because he finally realized the situation was bigger than just us. Jordan stayed out of it, thankfully. He knew the damage was already done and didn't want to cause more. Claire denied everything at first, but when HR traced the internal complaint emails and fake message logins back to her workstation, she broke. She said she just wanted me to feel what she felt, forgotten, second best. She admitted she was in love with Alex and thought if I was pushed out, he'd finally notice her. But in the end, her plan had destroyed more than just my reputation. I was cleared at work, but the damage to my marriage couldn't be undone so easily. Mark and I had one last long conversation that night. We cried, we talked, and for the first time in months, we were honest. He told me he needed space. Not because he hated me, but because he needed to find himself again outside of the pain. I moved out 2 days later. But just when I thought everything was finally behind me, I got one more message. This time, it was from Alex. We need to talk. I didn't tell you the whole truth. Claire wasn't working alone. And suddenly, I realized the story I thought had ended was only just beginning. I didn't know whether to open Alex's message or delete it. After everything, I didn't owe him anything. But something in me needed closure. I called him the next morning and asked him to be honest, fully, for once. He met me at a small coffee shop away from the office, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. He told me Claire hadn't acted alone. There was someone else, someone from HR who had quietly helped her access certain files and cover her digital tracks. Apparently, Claire had confided in them during late-night talks, and things spiraled from there. Whether it was jealousy, obsession, or misplaced loyalty, they had gone too far. But now, HR was launching a full investigation, and both Claire and her accomplice were suspended indefinitely. Hearing all of this gave me a strange mix of relief and sadness. I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone. But still, the damage had already been done. My marriage was still broken. My name still carried a shadow around the office. And my sense of trust, both in others and in myself, was deeply shaken. I told Alex I didn't want anything more from him. Not apologies. Not explanations. I needed to focus on rebuilding my life, piece by piece. He respected that. Maybe it was the first real thing he ever did for me. In the weeks that followed, I settled into a small apartment near the edge of town. Quiet, simple. I started therapy, not just to work through the betrayal, but to understand why I let things go so far in the first place. I reached out to Mark once, just to say thank you, for standing by me during the fallout, even when he had every reason not to. He responded kindly. We're not together, and maybe we never will be again, but there's peace in knowing we both survived it. This story wasn't just about infidelity. It was about choices, consequences, and the hidden cracks that grow in silence when people stop being honest with each other and with themselves. If there's anything I've learned, it's that love isn't enough without communication. And that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living behind a mask. I thought I couldn't resist temptation. And in the end, it cost me everything. But what I found in the wreckage was myself. And sometimes, that's where the real story begins. This was my true infidelity story. 20.